you need to get power. You need
Yes.
power to achieve anything. The creation of MK and even the funding of MK is being alleged, right all the way back across Africa to Moscow. Is the ANC going to change? Will they then be a different animal altogether to say, no, now we are going to move away from discriminatory practices, from black economic empowerment, from affirmative action. We're going to start to have a system based on merit. We are going to attract foreign direct investment, those kind of things.
South Africa is hurtling towards the general election, and everything is up for grabs. The sands shift almost by the day. And one of the people who has been around in Parliament for probably the longest and certainly is still a very important part of the South African political scene is Corné Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus. Corné, welcome back to the State of the Nation.
Thank you very much. It's a huge pleasure to be back. Thank you.
Yeah. So here we go, and a lot of work is now. Your plate is full. You're heading towards the election. How are things looking for the Freedom Front Plus?
Well, I think for the Freedom Front Plus, I'm always an optimist. And I think
Yes.
for the party itself, I'm quite optimistic. I think the party is very well positioned. I always use the example to say that we've got many parties registered in South Africa. But luckily, the vast majority of those are not participating in elections. You've got about what I call the A team, which is maybe 10 or more political parties, and they participate on national level as well as in all 9 provinces. Now, the Freedom Front Plus has been one of those from the beginning. We are still there in this election again, and I'm very optimistic. Things are looking very good at this stage.
Okay, and it's interesting. Here we sit about 2 months before the election, and I've seen a lot of advertising from the EFF and the DA and from the Freedom Front Plus be noticeable. You guys have been a little bit more strategic. I see you have bigger billboards and not too much of the street pole things, but very little from the ANC.
Yes. The ANC has, the last couple of elections, they have started to act strangely in this regard. Sometimes they only get the game together in the last 10 days and then suddenly there's some posters coming up. But there's almost nothing seen from the ANC at this stage. And it could be that there's a huge financial problem. Because I'm also trying to understand why they want to push that legislation through Parliament, at which they are doing at the moment. And it's all about funding of political parties. So I think there's a huge problem. I don't think they get any more donations. I don't think they know how to use their resources. And the ANC is definitely in trouble, I've got no doubt.
And maybe they're just waiting for checks to clear.
Well, the problem is in terms of the current legislation, they have to declare monies and donations that they do receive, more than 100,000 Rand donations. The upper limit is still there, 15 million per donation. So we'll see where that comes and brings them. But at this stage, I think they are desperate for money. That's why they changed the funding formula for political parties in Parliament. They rushed that through the National Assembly. It was passed in the NCOP yesterday. And now it's off to the president to be signed. But obviously the opposition parties are not going to sit back. We've already indicated that we will challenge this in court, and that is where we are now.
Now, let's first deal with before we go into the Freedom Front Plus and some of the areas to look out for. Let's talk about the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission. They've had some work on their hands this time, and they seem. We mustn't forget that the guy who heads it up used to be a part of the Zuma apparatus.
Yes, we've been in a position since 1994 to have an electoral commission that one could depend on in the past. There was no questions asked about the impartiality as well as the effectiveness of the electoral commission. And that is what we need. If you want to come out of an election where nobody queries the result, you must be in a position where your electoral commission is really independent and absolutely objective and also very effective and efficient. Now, there has been challenges in the last couple of cycles, if I may put it that way. We've seen, for example, in Cape Town, there was a recount asked for in the metro of Cape Town, which brought a change in seating. That's completely unacceptable. And there has been some cuts in the budget for the Electoral Commission that is also not a very good idea. So there are some new challenges. The fact that the Electoral Commission now has to accommodate independence, which is a strange phenomenon, with all due respect, is also making it very difficult for them. They will be observed from all sides, from political parties, from civil society, and hopefully they can stick to what they need to do. They are running a very tight time schedule. We are talking about 2 months, and a lot of things need to happen in the next 2 months to produce a credible election that will be accepted.
And in your opinion, I mean, you've got a lot of people watching today that will have some question marks as to whether South Africa's election will be representative of the will of the voters.
Well, first of all, I think we're going to have a higher than usual poll. I think more people will participate in this election. I think there's less apathy at this stage because I think there are a lot of choices for people out there to go and decide which party they want to support, firstly. And secondly, I think there's so much focus, and this election is so vital that I don't think we can afford any questions being asked about the credibility of the election. We will do from our side what we can, and we hope that there are sufficient international observers as well. And let's give the IEC a chance to prove themselves. Let's see.
Yeah, and I suppose it's got to be said that our processes are still quite robust.
Yes.
So, it's going to be pretty difficult to do something on a grand scale in South Africa.
Yes, absolutely. What one may find is there may be some interference even beforehand in terms of social media, in terms of messages being sent, in terms of fake news being created. Those kind of things are
But they won't come from the IEC.
They won't come from the IEC, but those kind of things are most likely going to happen in the run-up to the election. We've seen some stuff already going around created by artificial intelligence, but it's not from the IEC. The IEC has got their own processes. It is a robust process, and let's try to keep them to exactly what is expected.
So let's talk about the election. You mentioned that you're anticipating a higher than normal poll.
Yep.
South Africa has been normalizing in our percentage poll. I know that it comes as a bit of a shock when the percentage poll goes down, and percentage poll means the number of registered voters that actually vote.
Yes.
But in actual fact, the reality is that because of what happened as we came into the new South Africa, we did have, if you go to 1994, a far higher percentage poll than you would see in a normal established democracy. And that was because, many people got to vote for the first time. So it was quite predictable that, especially with the iconic 94 elections, and then gradually we've kind of normalized.
Yes, there was also no voters' roll in 1994.
Yes.
You only had to be a citizen. Anyone who could produce citizenship in the form of an identity document could just go and vote. So since then, we've normalized by having an electoral roll, which made it different. And I think if you look at some of the registrations were up, especially amongst younger voters, which is also a good indication. But things have normalized in the last couple of cycles.
Okay, so you're now seeing it because of the importance of the election, perhaps going up a little from what we've seen in recent elections.
Yes, it could be that voters who abstained in the last election because of apathy have now found new political homes because there are now some new parties coming around, which will maybe attract some of those voters. We don't know. Our indication clearly has been right from the beginning that almost a third of ANC traditional supporters are unhappy with their party. And the question was in the past, they would rather abstain before voting for any other party. I don't know if that's still the case. Some of them may now vote for different parties, that they have moved beyond the point of abstaining because they still feel a little bit loyal. But I think we've moved beyond that. And that makes this election the most unpredictable since 94.
Now, an increased poll, one would imagine that the Freedom Front Plus does attract a very loyal voter base. Would it be fair to say that an increased poll would actually hurt the Freedom Front Plus because of your percentage of...
It could, but maybe not, because at the moment the party has also extended our support base beyond the traditional support that we've had and the loyal base that we've had. So we've moved into other communities. If you looked at our manifesto launch 2 or 3 weeks ago, being attended by people from different sectors of society and different other communities. So we're all reaching out into other spheres of traditional support, if I may put it like that. So a higher poll, obviously one would expect your people and your supporters to go to the polls and vote, and you hope that your opponents stay away from the polls. But everybody hopes exactly the same. So it's difficult to predict, but I'm not that worried that the higher poll is going to be bad for us.
Okay. And let's talk about your extension into the non-traditional. We really are dancing around what we're talking about. Freedom Front Plus was known as a place for conservative Afrikaans, white Afrikaners.
Yes.
And we certainly saw a bit of a breakthrough in the last election where the Freedom Front Plus started to attract not necessarily only Afrikaners, but many English speakers.
Correct.
But it's fair to say the majority remained, overwhelming majority remained white.
Yes.
Do you foresee the Freedom Front Plus breaking the colour bar?
Absolutely, no doubt. I've got no doubt about that. We already saw that in 2021. For example, in the 2021 elections, the local government elections in the Western Cape, the majority of my candidates in that election were people of colour, if I may put it like that. So we are making absolutely strides into other communities. And the reason for that is the party changed our mission statement a couple of years ago to say, we want to be a party that looks at South Africa and say our diversity should be a strength. It's not a burden. And in order to make it a strength, we should look out for the rights of minority groups in South Africa as well. And we're reaching out to all minorities because actually sometimes people think in terms of race, but if you look within those groups, you'll find lots and lots of minority communities and minorities that also want to feel that they're accepted, that they're accommodated, and we're reaching out to them and we get huge support across the spectrum.
I suppose one could say that South Africa is a stir fry, not a stew, isn't it? The component parts are
very much a reality.
Of the reality.
And even if you look at our constitution, that's why we've got 11 official languages. I once was asked by a person from the United States in an interview, how many people speak the language South African? And the answer was nobody. There's no such language. And that's because of part of our diversity. So our support at the moment is coming across the spectrum. And we are also making inroads into other traditional parties. People, for various reasons, are unhappy with some of those parties, and they are joining our party. So we are very happy.
Now, Corné, the Freedom Front Plus has always historically been quite well represented outside of metro areas. They had a strong base in the platteland and rural communities. That, I'd imagine, must help, because those communities are up for grabs.
Yes, no, it does. It does absolutely help. When the party was founded in 1994, a very strong part of our support basically came obviously from Gauteng, and also then from Northwest Province, the Free State, Mpumalanga. But there are also some demographic shifts happening in the country at the moment. In those days, the Western Cape was not one of our strong points, but that is changing now. The Western Cape is becoming a very much strong pillar in the party. Gauteng will always be a very relevant factor within the party. Northwest, the Free State, Mpumalanga, all those remain very strong support bases within the party. And technically, if you look at it at the moment, there are only 3 parties in South Africa, ANC, the DA, and the EFF, who have representation on national level as well as in all 9 provinces. The party that comes next is the Freedom Front Plus. In the last election, we ended with representation on national level and in 8 of the 9 provinces. The only one we were not represented last time was KZN, but I'm convinced that we'll make a breakthrough in KZN as well, and then be truly a national party having representation throughout the country.
Now, I could very well be sitting with the next Premier of the Western Cape, isn't that right? You are the head of the Freedom Front Plus in the Western Cape.
That's correct. I'm the leader of the party in the Western Cape, and my party decided to appoint me as the candidate for the premiership on behalf of the party in the Western Cape. And I think it's going to be a very interesting premiership race, if I may put it that way. If you look at some of the individuals in this race, obviously, it will be the incumbent, Mr. Alan Winde from the Democratic Alliance. He wants to be re-elected. I will be a candidate from the good. It's Patricia de Lille herself. I understand Mr. Gayton McKenzie will be the premier candidate for the Patriotic Alliance, and some others. So it's going to be quite an interesting race. We will have some debates in the next 2 months, and let's see how it plays out.
I suppose you could ask whether Patricia de Lille is standing for good or for the ANC.
Well, I think
she's been a loyal cadre, hasn't she?
Well, I think in the last 5 years she served in cabinet, but I think also that relationship has turned a little bit sour. I think I may be wrong, but I think I don't think that the ANC is going to appoint her back in the executive after the election. And I think that she realizes that she needs to stand up for the community that she wants to represent.
Yeah. So let's turn our attention then to let's stay with that Western Cape discussion, because amongst the many shifts that we're going to see is that we could very well see the DA lose their outright majority in the Western Cape. I mean, that's a reality.
That is a reality. Let's quickly look at the figures and the percentages. The latest poll that I saw was one done for one of the institutes for social, the Foundation for Social, so I can't remember now the name exactly, but that's the institute for Dr. Frans Corné.
Yes.
And they used a polling company that is quite credible out there. The poll indicated that the DA is currently at 53%.
Yes.
Freedom Front Plus was set at 7%, and then some of the other parties had less. The ANC had a little bit more, obviously, I think 18%, and the EFF was at 10%. But if you look at the legislature itself, the legislature in the Western Cape is one of the smaller legislatures, which is strange. It should be much bigger. The legislature in the Western Cape consists of 42 members, and currently the DA has got 24. So if they lose 3 seats, it will be a 50-50 split between them and the other parties. If they lose 4 seats, they will be a minority that will need a coalition partner, obviously. And I'm convinced that this is exactly what's going to happen. We will take some seats from the DA, but there are other parties as well. The Patriotic Alliance is a very strong contender in the Western Cape. It's interesting that the polls don't indicate that. But if you look at the by-elections, they are having huge success in by-election after by-election, specifically in the Western Cape. So it's very unpredictable. Obviously, the DA is going full out to retain their majority, but I think it's very likely that there will be a coalition, and then the DA will need some coalition partners. And the Freedom Front Plus, with all due respect, has proved ourselves as a reliable partner at the moment. We are co-governing with the DA in 11 municipalities out of 30 in the Western Cape in coalition governments.
So that gives you some leverage. So I better be nice to you, because you never know.
Well,
this is politics after all.
It is politics after all. We are committed from Freedom Front Plus's point of view. We would like to see the government in the Western Cape be a good government that has the right economic policies that can bring stability, further stability, much stronger economic growth in the Western Cape, etc., and make it the absolute model of what can be done.
Right.
And in order to do so, we will cooperate with the Democratic Alliance and form a coalition.
While we, just to end off the discussion of the Western Cape specifically and move on to other places, where do you stand on Cape independence?
Yes, the Freedom Front Plus has expressed ourselves very clearly in favor of Cape independence. Even in our national manifesto, we've indicated that. And I think an important point is this. We say that self-determination, or the right for communities to express themselves, is a fundamental internationally recognized concept. But one must understand there are different forms and values and levels of this kind of self-determination. It could be on a very local level where a community has got the right to take their own decisions, up to the highest level where a province gets autonomy or even breaks away altogether. That's in the first place. The second place is our policy is the party is a national party. We've got supporters, as I've said, throughout the country. So in our support for Cape exit, we say it's not a question of either or this or that. It's an and approach. We can support Cape exit in the Western Cape and support other forms of self-determination in other parts of the country, depending on the different circumstances. But we support that. At the moment in the Western Cape, I think there would be only 2 parties participating in this election in support of the concept. And what we are basically saying is this, and I can't understand that the DA is shying away from that. At the moment, the push is there to say, bring a referendum in the Western Cape on this specific topic, not the election where there are other aspects on the table. Bring a specific referendum and ask the electorate in the Western Cape, are you in favor, yes or no? We support that. We think it's the right thing to do, but the Democratic Alliance is refusing that, and they're shying away.
How would that referendum be held? Or what would be the basis for eligibility to vote in that referendum?
Well, obviously, it was an ideal opportunity to do it now on the same date as the election. It would have just meant another ballot paper as a referendum for that, with that specific question. If you look at other places in the world, for in the United States, in Switzerland, other places, they quite often have a referendum running with an election at the same time. Mm-hmm. The basis would be, obviously, it will have to be on the voters' roll. It can't just be a free-for-all. It will be people on the voters' roll of the Western Cape. You'll have to be registered as a voter, and then obviously all voters in the Western Cape would be eligible to participate in such a referendum.
Okay, so we'll have to see how that works. I actually interviewed Phil Craig from the Referendum Party I think it's a ludicrous idea, but that's my own opinion. Anyway, anybody wants to go watch that, please go and watch the interview I did with Phil Craig, because, I'm not sure how it works. But yeah, maybe I'm just being stupid. Let's talk about the rest of the picture. And obviously there's 3 hotly contested provinces and maybe a few others. But the next one of interest, we sit here in Gauteng, the mess that Gauteng has become.
Yes.
We currently in Joburg, where streets are exploding, buildings are burning, there's no water, etc., etc. Kuruleni, where they're having fights in their legislature, the one guy stealing the mayor's phone. It's a zoo. And with that, on top of that, we've got a premier in Gauteng right now, Panyaza Lesufi, that seems to be making the most outrageous promises and employing thousands of people. I'm not sure with what budget, etc. I'm not sure whether he's acting legally by doing all of this, but I presume the ANC will paper over those cracks later. But it does look, for all intents and purposes, like the ANC is going to fall significantly below 50%.
Yes.
And who knows what that coalition looks like afterwards.
Yes. If you look at Gauteng as a province, the indications were already there quite clearly in the 2021 local government election. Because Gauteng basically consists of 9 councils, of which 3 are huge, important metros. Johannesburg, Pretoria, Tshwane, Ekurhuleni. Those are the heart of the South African economy. And the ANC lost their majority in all 3 of those. You remember that we succeeded in putting coalition governments together right in the beginning, in Johannesburg, in Tshwane, Pretoria. Ekurhuleni was also a coalition, but it was a minority coalition, minority government from day one. But in the end, it was not all that not successful. It went quite well up to a point. So the indications then already were that the ANC is in trouble, and nothing happened since to turn that tide around in the favor of the ANC. Exactly the opposite, basically. I would have preferred, obviously, that the multi-party coalition group could have taken control of Johannesburg again, and my view is very clear. We could have done so. There were at least 3 opportunities since our coalition fell the first time. At least 3 opportunities where we could have done so. Those opportunities were squandered by some of the political parties in that group, unfortunately so. So now we're going into this election, and I think we will succeed in getting the ANC well below 50%. But we need to get them so far down that they are not able to form a coalition with some of the Mickey Mouse parties or with some of the bad guys. I don't want that. We need to form a coalition of the multi-party charter group in Gauteng, which means it will be the Democratic Alliance, the Freedom Front Plus, the IFP, Action South Africa, ACDP. Those are the core parties within the multi-party charter. And I think that if we come together as a collective, which we intend to do, we will be able to form a sound coalition in Johannesburg and in Gauteng as such, in the province. We're talking about the provincial result.
KZN?
KZN was also a clear indication from the beginning that the ANC is in trouble there, and it was a toss-up between the ANC and the IFP. The DA, I think, in third, perhaps. But then things dramatically changed with the arrival of MK as a party in KZN. It seems at the moment that the vote, and that's what the polls indicate, are split on a 20-20-20 basis. So it's very unclear and unstable what may happen. That there's going to be a coalition is absolutely clear. Who the parties will be is uncertain, but there will be a coalition. And obviously the multi-party charter also participates as individual parties there, and they will first of all try to form such a coalition.
Yeah, now, I don't suppose, one of the best comments around coalitions was a recent interview I did with JJ Tabani, where he said, it doesn't matter what I think about coalitions, they're going to happen because somebody doesn't get more than 50% of the vote. So let's have a quick discussion around MK.
Yes.
Which, yes, it's the sort of appeal of MK, I think, has caught a lot of people by surprise. You've got a compromised ex-president that was responsible for, we've got about 5 volumes of Zondo Commission, all done under what we call state capture, which was really just code for President Jacob Zuma's misrule. 81 years old, he probably is not eligible to go to Parliament because he's got a recent conviction for contempt of court. but yet is finding a lot of traction. What's your reading of the situation?
Yes, I think first of all, the creation of MK did catch most of us unawares. It was a surprise. But I don't think there should be any doubt that MK didn't happen recently. I think the preparation has been going on for more than a year, more than 18 months. It only became known recently when the party came to the fore and was formally registered. If you look at the financing, if you look at the election material available, if you look at some of the structures, it's quite clear that this is not a recent development. This has been planned for quite a while. And I've got no doubt that that's the case. And there's an interesting article written recently which draw a very clear connection between MK and the creation of MK, and even the funding of MK is being alleged, right all the way back across Africa to Moscow. And I think people should go and have a look at that specific article and what's happening and what's playing out there. Time will tell in the end how correct that is, but let's see. Now, from MK's perspective, and I thought about that this morning specifically, and I said to myself, maybe the creation of MK is a very clear indication that the ANC has not been a happy ship for a while, not a happy ship at all. And they've been plastering over some ethnic and tribal cracks within the ANC for a long, long time. And we know that right from the beginning, it was always a very strong support base for the ANC in the Eastern Cape and in KZN. And the leadership over many, many years came basically from those two provinces. And then when Mr. Ramaphosa became president, he's not from either province. He came from Venda in the northern province, Limpopo. So it seems that there was some unhappiness in that regard. And then obviously because of other political realities and shenanigans, I don't think Mr. Zuma has ever accepted the fact that he was pushed out and recalled before he concluded his term the last time around. And he's got a point to prove. And it goes way back to the whole Nkandla saga.
It probably goes back to the arms deal should be a shake saga.
Yeah, exactly. It goes a long, long way back. So there's a score to settle. When Mr. Zuma was the president of the ANC did very well in KZN. And I think he's relying on that traditional support to come back to him. I had a look at the ballot papers or the lists that were handed into the IEC yesterday, or became known yesterday. They are participating in most of the provinces, but they are not competing in the Western Cape. I don't think they are in the Northern Cape, but they are quite obviously going for KZN. They should get some traction in Mpumalanga. They'll get some traction in parts of Gauteng, I guess, but I'm not sure that it will get much further than that. There's a claim that he's got good support in the Eastern Cape. I will have to see if that plays out. But what is the game here? Because the reality is, as you correctly pointed out, first of all, Mr. Zuma cannot become president again. The Constitution says 2 terms. He served for 2 terms. Furthermore, you need to be a member of Parliament in the first place. He's not eligible for Parliament because he's got a jail term sentence of more than 12 months without the option of a fine. So that is not an option. But it's quite clear that the party wants to use him as the face of their campaign and use him as the face to get the maximum support. Obviously at this stage, MK is part of an alternative grouping of other political parties, I would say, on the opposite side of the spectrum from where the multi-party charter group would stand.
Now, he did say that part of his intention is to put the ANC back together again.
Yeah, well, I think the thinking there is the ANC will only be together again if I'm in charge.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily work like that. That would mean he would need to get the EFF also back, because the EFF is basically still the ANC Youth League, currently dressed in red. So it could be an attempt to try and reach back to the good old days of the past. But I think South Africa moved on. It's now 30 years later. And the ANC squandered many opportunities. They did not deliver the better life for everyone as they promised. The country is in a total shambles in many respects. And I think it's a dream that's not going to go anywhere. The question is, what will happen to MK if Mr. Zuma is no longer there? And I used the analogy the other day by saying, I remember the AWB. When Mr. Terblanche was no longer there, the AWB basically collapsed. Because you cannot build a political party or a real organization around the persona of one individual. You need more than that.
Yes. Now, while we're talking about parties built around the persona of one individual, right, the third biggest party is the EFF.
Yes.
I've made some people unhappy that have watched the State of the Nation by calling them a cult. If you go through the 7
Yes.
things, they fit quite snugly into the idea of that. But quite clearly, Julius Malema is in charge. And if you don't agree with him, there's a very good chance you're going to go to number 200 on the list.
Ask Honorable Chirwa.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Floyd Shivambu was suddenly recalled from KZN. The other poor guy in KZN, a sacrificial lamb for not getting a bus to their party up here at FNB Stadium. But yet every poll has them growing.
That's interesting. Yes, but the by-election results have them shrinking.
Yes.
They have not done well in by-elections, which is the actual test. When you go to and you count the votes, what does that say? And they have been around 2% in many occasions, or even less, way in last place in some of these by-elections. So some of the polls indicate that, but I'm not convinced that the EFF has not reached the ceiling. I don't see them growing beyond much beyond where they are now. They may even decrease, but we'll have to wait and see. But you're right. I remember very well when the EFF, before they came to Parliament the first time, they openly stated and said, we want to bring the revolution to Parliament. And that's what they've been doing. They idolize every revolutionary they can find on the planet Earth, and they think that out of total chaos, out of the ashes, a new dispensation will arise, and they will then be in charge of something wonderful and beautiful.
And also they adopted an interesting strategy of basically putting every compromised ex-ANC person into the EFF.
Yes.
They got the former public protector Busium Kobani, who's got, dishonorably dismissed Mzwanele Manye, Carl Nias, who was a guest on the show. Shame, poor old Carl finally seems to have a paying job.
Yeah.
And, that's ahead of real activists like Naledi Chirwa.
Absolutely. There's always a reason. You've got 1 minute of glory to say this prominent person has now joined us. You will pay the price sooner than later, because there's a reason why that prominent person was kicked out where he or she was before then. It's not only just moonshine and roses, and they understand that.
Yeah.
So it's a very unhappy ship, that as well. It's not just plain sailing there at all. And you can run a party to a certain extent, but don't think that you are making enemies. I think that the expression there is very much realistic in that case, where the opponents are sitting opposite them, but the enemies are sitting behind the leadership.
Okay, so all of the things that we've discussed seem to make it plain sailing for a multi-party charter, which includes all what one should call the common sense parties of South Africa.
Yes.
But yet it doesn't look so brilliant.
Yes, yes. We succeeded in bringing together the multi-party charter group, consisting of, as you point out correctly, those parties that are the common sense parties. And I think they can bring a new beginning in South Africa. But in the end, after everything is being said and done, after all the votes are counted, all the percentages are calculated, there are 400 members in Parliament. And in order to govern, we need a majority of more than 200. And 201 is a majority, but that's too slim. I'm working on a project called 210, which gives you a little bit of leeway to form a government, because you need 210 or a majority, a stable majority, to elect a new speaker, to elect a new president from the charter side, who can then appoint his or her cabinet and then can start to govern South Africa. So you need to ask yourselves, the parties within the charter, what are they capable of? How far can they go to get to that magic number of 210? And then if you look at the percentages, you look at opinion polls, etc., I think it's clear that we are not there at the moment. It's not the case. Some polls say if you combine these parties, you talk about 35% perhaps. Some say it may be a little bit higher. Some say it may be a little bit lower. We don't know. But be that as it may, let's say it's 35%. That would be still a formidable block that you have to go into whatever happens after the election, because we may find that no other entity or group may get to 35% themselves. We don't know where the ANC is going to end up. But then there are a few parties, and some of them are difficult to say exactly where they stand, who are not part of the multi-party charter, and at some stages did express in terms of their positioning that they could work with a multi-party charter to try and bring the numbers to a majority. There are parties like, for example, Bousaf, Musi Maimane. I must say I was impressed when he was able to hand in 140,000 plus signatures.
That certainly surprised everybody.
Everybody, that's a clear indication that there's been some work done on grassroots level. Those are not electronic signatures, those are hand door-to-door collected signatures. That's interesting. Rise Mzansi is a factor. Rise Mzansi seems to have some funding behind it. It's got a good campaign, etc., etc. Originally, Rise Mzansi did indicate that they could be part of this grouping, but there's also been some policy statements made recently, which does put a question mark in terms of where do we really stand. And then, of course, there's a Patriotic Alliance, which is a very unpredictable reality, which could end up as the kingmaker, which is it's also a challenge.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the Patriotic Alliance.
Sure.
I've had my own discussions with them on this platform. I'm not 100% convinced that they're not a gangster organization, and they certainly have behaved that. And Gayton McKenzie has been an absolute expert at blaming Helen Zille for the fact that he's in coalition with ANC, which is a ridiculous claim, right? Because she's a little lady. I can't see him, this big, strong guy, so slighted by Helen Zille that he's going, and he can't give a political speech without talking badly about the ANC, but yet they're in a very cozy relationship in Johannesburg. The chairman of the Patriotic Alliance is the chairman of the Joburg Roads Agency. Suddenly, after they get the transport portfolio in the city of Johannesburg, there's a whole lot of the fiber provided to the city is suddenly part of the roads department. It's starting to look like what the Patriotic Alliance wants is positions and access to tenders.
Well, let me start off by saying this. We need to ask ourselves which parties are going to get people elected. At the moment, for example, we do have parties in the multi-party charter who did not succeed in getting registration, so they will not be able to participate. And then you'll have parties outside the charter who will get people elected. So you need to weigh all the different parties that will get people elected. I've got no doubt in my mind that the Patriotic Alliance will be one of them. They are going to get people elected to Parliament. They are going to get people elected into some of the different legislatures. I'm not sure they participate in all 9 provinces. I guess they do. So that's going to be a reality and a fact. Now, right way back, I had a discussion with Mr. McKenzie right at the beginning of the local government elections. And I explained to him, and I said, from my perspective, the role that I've played in those days were I've been in opposition all my life throughout my whole career, which is a huge challenge because you try to achieve things without having political power. And Mr. McKenzie heard that. And then he said, but to him, he understands that message to mean you need to get power. You need power to achieve anything.
And he said it on this platform.
Okay, he said that. So from his perspective, it's all about power. So positioning himself in that position it's also a little bit powerful in the sense that he played the role of kingmaker in Johannesburg by being able to go with this group or with that group. There was a time when he was part of the multi-party group in the city of Johannesburg, and things worked out quite well. But there are certain things that caused problems. And as you point out, I don't think one can just blame one specific party alone because things come from different perspectives and from different situations. What caused the breakdown in Johannesburg specifically was when there was a vacancy in the position of speaker. And the other parties felt that maybe we should have more diversity there because all those positions were with the DA and we supported an IFP speaker. The DA refused. And the other coalition parties accepted that and let it go, but the Patriotic Alliance was adamant they will not accept that, and that caused the breakdown, etc. But as you pointed out, they were then accommodated within with the ANC in an alliance. After the formation of the multi-party charter and we signed the agreement, the Patriotic Alliance was approached and they did express themselves that they wanted to come into the charter and they were prepared at that stage to break all ties with the ANC. It didn't materialize because at that stage the DA then said we are not prepared to talk to the Patriotic Alliance. So there's a very bad relationship basically coming, I think, from both sides. The reality is, in the end, if you look at some of the policy positions, and I listened to Mr. Gayton McKenzie at another conference recently, yes. Policy-wise, one can talk about some of the economic policies and things that one can understand in terms of taking South Africa forward and have good economic policies that can assist. But then you need to be able to cooperate and to work together. And at the moment, it seems not to be possible. So it's going to be one of those cases where we will know after the final election result what can you put together and what is workable and what is not workable. But the ideal would not be to put any one individual political party in a position where that one party can determine and say, I determine and I demand this, or I don't cooperate with either this group or that group. If you look at, for example, the Freedom Front Plus, we've got certain principled stances in terms of policy, in terms of things that we believe in, which just makes it impossible to cooperate or work with certain political parties. And that's what you believe in. You can't have played this today, this side, today, that side, just for the sake of power. Can't do that.
Which leads us to the rumors that are swirling, and even I've been part of that rumor mill. That certainly from where I sit, things are looking to me like we could very well see one of the big members of your multi-party charter, i.e. the DA, perhaps considering a coalition agreement with the ANC.
Yes, it is a serious concern. The mere fact that this is being discussed, the mere fact that people are speculating is already to me a red light. It says what's going on here. And there's been some things when that was said in the past and it was denied, etc., etc. There was a report, I think, by Reuters that was in the press yesterday. Mr. Steenhuisen was at the Cape Town Press Club yesterday, where he was asked about that again. Now, I think the important thing is this. If you strictly look from the provisions of the multi-party charter, it clearly says, Section 7 in that charter says that after the election, none of the parties that are co-signatories to this charter will vote for any candidate put up in any election by the ANC. One is just to understand that. Let's say now it's after the election. The ANC puts up somebody as the speaker or the president. The parties here committed themselves they will not vote in favor of such a person. We will put up our own candidates. The first prize remains. We want to get the majority so that we can govern. But I am concerned when these rumors are starting to run around. I had a panel discussion end of last year where Dr. Leon Schreiber was present on behalf of the Democratic Alliance. And he made a very strong point at that stage to the audience that the EFF is the problem. The EFF is the big danger. We must unite against the EFF. And my response was, no. The EFF has not governed South Africa for one single day. All the mess that we are in are the products of the ANC. The ANC is the problem, not the EFF. The EFF is a role player. But by saying that, I asked the question, is that trying to create a climate to say after the election, in order to keep the EFF out, and now it becomes more complicated. Now it could be added to keep the EFF and MK out. We have to find some kind of compromise. Let's work with the ANC. And that is a serious concern, and I think the electorate is entitled to know from political parties exactly where they stand before the election and before they go out and cast a ballot.
What about the other possibility that with the really dreadful state that South Africa finds itself in, 50% unemployment, no power, no investment, no water in Joburg, you name it, you can just pile on the stories at the moment. Is there a situation whereby you could have a coalition between the ANC and the multi-party charter under what is called a government of national unity?
Yes, I think that ship sailed in 2019. At that time, I said if I were President Ramaphosa, I would have instituted a government of national unity after the 2019 election. Why? South Africa was not that fragmented like we are now. Things were much more clearer at that stage, and also economically, infrastructure-wise, we were not in the dire straits where we are now. At that stage, it was clear we are in trouble, but I would have done it in 2019. The problem now is because the country is much more fragmented, and the forces are piled up against each other, staring across the battle almost of, let's say, political anger, if I can use that term. And the infrastructure is a problem, the economy is a problem. It's very much going to be more difficult to do it now. But the question is, and I hear this kind of argument quite often of a government of national unity, and it's something that business sector says, that's maybe a good idea, we can live with that. Why? Because there won't be any serious policy changes. Really? Does that mean that business are happy with the current policies in South Africa in terms of how things are done? Is that acceptable? Then, well, those are the ANC policies. The question is, in a government of national unity, is the ANC going to change? Will they then be a different animal altogether to say, no, now we are going to move away from discriminatory practices, from black economic empowerment, from affirmative action. We're going to start to have a system based on merit. We are going to attract foreign direct investment, those kind of things. I don't see the ANC changing that. And now the question is, for the DA or for the multi-party charter, are they prepared to let go of their strong stance on these issues and say, well, we accept we have to have that part of the deal? It may sound very good, but I think my prediction would be that if you try to do this, it will break down very quickly and more radical elements will come to the fore, unfortunately.
Okay, so as we go into the election, the only thing under your control at this stage is the Freedom Front Plus. Campaign's going well.
Yes.
Expectation, hope. What are you looking at?
Yes, I'm very optimistic, and I hope that I can have some influence beyond the Freedom Front Plus, in the sense that the construction of the multi-party charter is a perfect construction, meaning here you've got a collective of parties. It's not a coalition agreement, it's a pre-election agreement of parties that have joint vision, that have joint priorities, that have joint principles, that say, we want to govern South Africa and form a better government for a better South Africa in terms of these things that we agree upon. But the magic is, you go out and you vote for any one of the individual parties that are signatories to this charter. And I can still vote for the party of my preference, but I will know they will form part of a coalition government that will govern the country in terms of this vision, in terms of their principles and priorities. That's a very good process that we need. So at this stage, I say no one can sit back and say, well, let's see how things are playing out. It's going to be an interesting thing. I'm watching this fight from the side. Nobody can do that. If anyone is interested in changing this country around, he or she needs to become an activist, if you're not one already. Get involved and make sure that you, your family, your friends, convince anyone that's registered that they need to go out and vote for a party within the charter group. From my perspective, Freedom Front Plus is the answer, but I'm realistic. People will have other preferences as well. Go and vote for a party within the charter group and make the charter parties as strong as possible, because whatever happens after the election, whatever negotiations to form coalitions, the stronger the charter group is going to be, the better position we are, and our policies and things are the things that I believe can take South Africa forward. From Freedom Front Plus's point of view, I believe we're going to do very well. The feedback that we get from the ground at the moment is very positive and very constructive. We saw the enthusiasm at our manifesto launch. We see that in terms of our daily interaction with people. I'm responsible specifically for the Western Cape, and I'm very excited in terms of what's playing out there. And I think, and you know me, I really believe in coalition governments. I don't believe in one-party governments. In South Africa, we've seen that for quite way too long. Since 48, for many, many years, it was one party. Since 94, it's one party. In the Western Cape, it's one party. I do not accept that one party has got all the answers, knows everything what's in the best interest. Good coalitions force people to compromise and to bring the best to the table. And that's what we are committed to from the Freedom Front Plus's point of view. We were the first party already in 2009 who said the answer would lie within coalitions. We are now there, and I'm optimistic.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Perhaps the Freedom Front Plus is the answer for you. But to echo what our guest today, Corné Mulder, has said, these elections are very, very important. We've said it before. We're going to say it again. We're going to keep on saying it. Get out there and vote and convince everyone you know that the importance of this election. I'd like to thank Pace Car Rental for sponsoring this episode, and I'd like to thank my guest Corné Mulder for joining us. To everybody that's stuck around this long, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you the next time on the State of the Nation. Thank you.
Thank you.